Live from the Panera Studios, it's the Reading with Robin show, brought to you each week by my friends at Panera Bread. Panera is one of my favorite places to hang out, whether I'm going in for a cup of coffee, meeting up with some friends, or stopping in late afternoon for that little pick-me-up that I need, my nice iced coffee. I love picking up a salad, whether I want to stay there and eat it or bring it home. You can also call ahead, and they'll have your order ready to go. That's all at Panera Bread. And now, enjoy the show. I received a message from my author about, a few weeks, maybe a month ago or something, to tell me about this book, How Does That Make You Feel? True Confessions from Both Sides of the Therapy Couch. I immediately was drawn to the title and so excited to be able to speak with author Sherry Amatenstein is a New York City-based therapist and author of the Q&A dating book, Love Lessons from Bad Breakups, and The Complete Marriage Counselor. She's contributed to Seal's anthology Shades of Blue, Writers on Depression, Suicide, and Feeling Blue, and we were just talking about how much I am such a fan of the anthology. Amatenstein was editor at Hearst and iVillage.com, currently an adjunct writing professor at New York University. She regularly freelances for numerous publications, including Redbook, Brides, Box.com, Quartz.com, and runs seminars nationwide and has offered relationship advice, I love this, on all of my favorite programs, Today, Early Show, HuffPo Live, Inside Edition, NPR. How Does That Make You Feel? True Confessions from Both Sides of the Therapy Couch is out now. You can visit her site at howdoesthatmakeyoufeel.com.
It's howdoesthatmakeyoufeelbook.com.
Oh, book.com. Yeah, how did that make you feel?
How does that make you feel? Book.com. Yeah.
How does that make you feel? Book.com. Did someone else have it without?
Yes, they did. Annoying them.
Right? So. Sometimes those people just park. They get really clever websites, and they just park it there. So they want to go to howdoesthatmakeyoufeelbook.com and find Sherry on Facebook, on Twitter, right, every place that people hang out so they don't miss anything. And we are going to be talking about these stories in the anthology. We were talking off air a little bit. It is I just love an anthology, especially when I read through and I see so many people that I've interviewed through the years included in this. So a lot of familiar writers and a lot of new writers. How did you go about collecting and finding out who would participate in a really personal kind of anthology?
Well, the idea for this book was to get both therapists and patients to talk very, very personally about their stories. I've seen anthologies before, one called, I think, On the Couch, obviously very appropriate, which were patients revealing stories, but I'd never seen one that had both. So that was my initial idea, to kind of illuminate what the process is really like and to demystify it. And I had qualms about kind of going beneath the curtain, so to speak, because part of therapy is about having that blank screen, the boundary where the patient doesn't really know who you are and they're projecting onto you. So nobody in the book, I didn't have any patient-therapist teams together. And all the therapists talked very, very personally about themselves and their lives and their traumas, but nothing about anything that we revealed. It's like we're sort of putting ourselves out there, but not our patients. And so I just tried to sort of have it be that way. But it was a long process of finding people to participate. I wanted everyone who was in the book to be a professional writer, and then I was really looking for really deep personal stories. I wanted to go the whole range, from the funny and really nutty to the incredibly serious and even tragic. And I feel that the book wound up going through it all, the good, the bad, the ugly, from both sides. And so any time that I read anything about somebody talking about a therapy experience, I would kind of like pounce like a shark.
I loved your article. Can we talk? Well, I think that, the way you describe it is so accurate because there is such a range of essays. And one of the things that I love about picking up a book like this, an anthology, and I'm on the phone with the editor of How Does That Make You Feel. You can visit her site is howdoesthatmakeyoufeelbook.com, Sherry Amatenstein. But I think that was one of the things that I love so much is that you can pick up a book like this and read a few stories and then go back and reread them, or and pick up what you sort of feel like reading about. Linda Yellen's very funny, which I know because I love Linda, and so hers is called The Never Ending Therapy Session, and I just thought that was so funny. But it does really balance out the ones that are, like you say, quite serious, tragic, and just so revealing and raw, and something for everybody to connect with in these stories. But tell me a little bit more about how you pounced. What's your shark pouncing technique?
Well, like for instance, with Patty Davis, who's in the book and was wonderful and so professional to work with. We were she was a Facebook friend, but I contacted her on Facebook and I didn't, hear back. We didn't really know each other personally. And then we were both on a thread by somebody who was talking about an article that they'd written a while back for New York Magazine about a terrible therapy experience. What else is new here, right? So Patty was commenting on that about a bad experience that she'd had with a former boyfriend years and years ago who wanted her to go to his really terrible misogynistic therapist, and she did. And so I contacted her. I sort of went on with her. I said, oh, by the way, I'm starting to work on this book, and she said yes. And she was the first one who got her story in, just on down the line, incredibly professional and wonderful. There were very light edits with her. She was great about it. So, but that's like one example. It was that's how I got her. But some people were contacting me because I was also posting and soliciting. But if they didn't have an interesting enough story, then there wasn't really anything in there because I wanted stories that I hadn't really heard before.
Yeah, these are really interesting. One after the other. I've read most of them, and they're all, like I say, they're all different. And with the whole patient-doctor the combo there, talking about doctors having triggers, your own essay in here, and how that and how does that make you feel? Because that is such an interesting thing. I don't know if people always, it depends on who the patient is, really is thinking about how what they're saying is affecting their doctor, what triggers they might have, or, I guess that's not really what you're supposed to go in there with, but they're people.
The tagline for my website is, if you've ever wondered what your therapist really thinks of you, it's here. And what your therapist is really thinking.
Right?
Because therapists, patients always do. They want to know what's going on in your head. And, again, a big part of therapy and the reason why we are supposed to be something of a blank slate is for them to project their fantasies and wishes onto us. And so the more they really know about us, there's a fear that it can pervert that experience from happening. So that, again, that was sort of a fear of mine. I didn't want that to happen in the book, but I also feel that there's a lot of therapists out there who are not that good and take advantage of patients who are vulnerable. And frankly, we're all in this together. We're all imperfect. Everybody's crazy in their own way.
And that's the truth,
And you certainly see that when you read the therapist's personal stories. And,
Well, one of my favorites was I Really, Really Hate You.
Yes, and that is the pseudonym for understandable reasons.
Talk about that one a little.
I only have two people who are pseudonyms in this one. Yes, so her pseudonym is Beth Sloan, and she's a therapist, and she's writing about a borderline patient who is a true horror. Borderline patients are not easy to deal with at all. So her story is called I Really, Really, Really Hate You. And
Understandably.
And it's about the hellish experience she had with this borderline patient who was basically bulldozing her, and just terrible to be around. So and I'm always being asked by people, well, what happens if you really hate a patient? Can you work with somebody you really hate?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's very hard to work with somebody you really hate. You can't really, and then you're also I'm asked a lot too, you really do develop feelings. I care about everybody I work with. There are patients who I work with who, I wish I could go out for drinks with them. They're like, great, I would want to be friends with them. And there are other ones who I'm very happy to just keep it in the room. There's lots of different levels of that. But if somebody comes in and they are such a toxic person
mm-hmm.
that I can't be around them, then I will say to them that I don't feel that I'm the right fit.
Well, and that's the tricky thing, too, and I don't know if people always realize that, because it is process, and so if the fit isn't there, it's an awful lot of work and not getting to, having goals met. And so it would be nice if there were some magical potion to know immediately, because I think people drop out of therapy in frustration sometimes, and it could just be not the right fit.
And that definitely can be the case, and that's another reason why I wanted people to realize, it's very important to find a therapist who is right for you. But the other piece of that is, and with people dropping out, is resistance,
mm-hmm.
And it's people often drop out just when they start to make real progress because it's uncomfortable,
right.
And discomfort, while it may be a good thing therapeutically, it's not a fun thing to experience. And it's often people come into therapy and they feel they can vent, or they just kind of keep going over the same ground. And when, as a therapist, you try to get them to look in a new place, in a new direction, to see it differently, to actually work on changing versus just, kind of thinking that they're stuck in this terrible dilemma and pattern, it's hard. I mean, if you've been doing something one way for 30, 40 years, you're wedded to the familiarity of it often. And if the therapy is working, you are starting to perhaps experience things that you don't want to experience. And so you should talk about that with your therapist. Like, don't just drop out without first talking about it and making sure why you're dropping out. Maybe you just need to slow down the therapy. But there also are definitely cases where the fit just doesn't work, and there's cases where it's a bad therapist.
Well, and that's
so it all depends. I mean, it's a collaboration.
It
really is a collaboration.
That's what's so tricky, though, because I've had friends who have said something about dropping it or walking away, or there's the cheating on the therapist thing, the lying to the therapist thing, right? All is just like a hairdresser, same thing.
Right.
And it's really more about what's going on with the person, but then there's the idea of I'm smarter, I know more, so dealing with the very intelligent patient can sometimes, I'm sure, be not exhausting.
Well, those are also, there's a lot of defenses that people put up, like intellectualization and rationalization, where they can talk very cogently on that level,
mm-hmm.
but they're really going underneath to get to the emotional side. That's something that they might be keeping very barricaded.
Yeah, and that sense of trust, and it's also
trust
fascinating.
Trust is essential. Trust
right.
is really important. Yeah,
and sometimes
that's, again, a reason why the thought of doing this book was a little scary. Because,
that was what I was going to ask you, because you're taking like the most sacred, one of the most sacred of relationships, and you're able to show both sides of the patient doctor stories. So I remember when I received your message about this book, thinking, wow, that is so fascinating, and what a smart book to put together. I just, immediately was so taken with the whole topic. So how do you sort of dance around that? And then what are the events like? You had events last week, and I'm on the phone with the editor of How Does That Make You Feel? True Confessions from Both Sides of the Therapy Couch. And you can visit Sherry's website at howdoesthatmakeyoufeelbook.com. and also find her on Facebook. You're on Twitter, right? Have we?
I
tweeted?
am at
Okay.
Therapy NYC.
Oh, that's so cool. Okay, I thought we did. I wasn't. I think we did. I couldn't remember. At Therapy, very cute.
Yeah,
I like
yeah.
that. That's right. And so what
at
comes
Therapy
out?
NYC. Yeah, that's
At,
right.
at Therapy NYC.
Okay.
So what do you find at the events? Because and I know Susan Shapiro's was about speed shrinking.
Yeah,
also
that was
very.
it's like I had 3 events last week, and there's on my website there's an events page so you can see what's coming up.
Yeah, check
I'm
out where
doing
Sherry will be.
A bunch more events like in New York, Long Island. I'm going to California, Woodstock. So there's a bunch of events coming up, and the first event was a speed shrinking event that, Sue Shapiro hosted in Soho, and that wasn't really a book event per se. It was great, and she's done many speed shrinking events. In fact, I've been a speed shrinker therapist for her many, many times.
That's so clever. Well, she's very
it
clever.
is. It's a very clever idea. So the idea is kind of like speed dating for a shrink. So you have there was 8 or 9 therapists, and then there were probably 100 people showed up, and everybody had 2 or 3 minutes with each therapist. And the idea isn't I'm going to, make my amazing therapist match and fix my life in 2-3 minutes, but kind of getting a taste of it and, just kind of seeing who might be right for you. But so that was that. But the first real book event was at Word Bookstore in Brooklyn. And at that event, there were 6 contributors with me. And it's the first time I've met some of them. And it was really wonderful. We each read a little. And I was actually the only therapist, so I was sort of standing up for my,
Your
my
people.
team.
Your
I guess
people, yes.
my people. Yeah.
Exactly.
So everybody read a little bit, but more of it was that we were talking about therapy and the process of it and what we expect and what's happened with us and boundaries and all these things. And then we opened it up, for Q&A and so it was just really interesting and fascinating. And everybody, seemed to, it's sort of like I had to end it because they were going to kick us out of there.
They closed at some point, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Plus, I felt I needed to leave a little time to actually sell some books. So, but
there's that. Do they have copies signed? Because sometimes I know Word will keep signed copies and you can go on.
Actually, no, they did. Well, they sold a good number of books that night, which was nice. But they didn't ask me. I guess to sign more books, but.
I might be thinking a book court. That's possible also.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's possible also because I know that they will sell signed books. But I have to think it would be such a really fascinating. You're in New York and you're talking about therapy with a bunch of people and writers. So that had to have been such a great event. And there are more events you can go.
Well, then I did an event on, because I don't want these just to be sort of sterile reading.
Sure.
Because it's such a juicy topic. So I did another event at the East Hampton Library Saturday in the Alec Baldwin room. Literally.
It was the whole big, right.
I think he bequeathed, the money for and it's a gorgeous library, huge room. And we did it as a conversation with Stephen Gaines, who is
I love Stephen's book.
Author. Yeah,
yes.
And
I
his
had
book
him.
Is you've had him on too?
Yeah. Yes. But this one thing first. I forget the time. Stephen Gaines. Yeah, it was maybe 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago.
Okay. Yeah, because his book came out recently.
Yeah. Fabulous book.
And I'm blanking on the title, which is terrible.
I think it was just this one of these things first.
Right, and it's about in the 60s, and being gay was something that you really kept hidden. So he was a teenager and he tried to kill himself, and then he was at Payne Whitney, and then he had his therapist started there, and he had years and years of conversion therapy and trying to be straight. So I just thought we could have a very lively, interesting conversation about therapy.
Yeah.
So, and then one of my contributors came as well, and then there was a Q&A. So we didn't read it all,
There's so much
and
to
then
talk
there
about.
was Q&A from the audience, and So it was good. So those are the 3 events I've done so far, and my next one is going to be on the 20th at the book review in Huntington, Long Island.
Yeah,
and I'm having 3 or 4 contributors will be with me there, and
love that
I have
story.
wine and treats and little mini
therapy. You don't
sessions.
need much. You don't need much more than that. Wine,
you
treats, and lots of great conversation, and
yes.
people
so,
can go
so
to.
The events that I'm having are really interesting. And because everybody has thoughts and feelings and experiences on this topic. So, yeah.
And the ones that are willing to share, even better. Now, one of the things I loved about your story that was in there is that you crashed a Seinfeld set. So that was something that jumped out at me. I love that. And you swiped 2 items.
I know. I say a lot of things in here that this is what it's like. I don't mind if my patients never read this book.
Well, I'm safe,
really
but I am
a
Seinfeld fanatic, and if I didn't think you were fabulous to begin with, I was absolutely.
I know they must have just vacated the set. Yeah, my friends and me, we were just sort of on a tour of the studio, and then we sort of veered off. And I don't know, we wound up on the Seinfeld set, and there was still like a cigarette butt and an ashtray and all that stuff. And so we just sort of were in one of those nutty moods and grabbed, a tape that was back in the VCR days. And
I
so
bow to you, Sherry.
Yeah.
I do.
It was just kind of one of those funny things. But it's not something that I would tell a patient in a therapy session, no.
No, well, and therein lies, right? The discussion, like you said,
that's exactly
as you say, there's that closeness and that connection that and the feeling of maybe, hey, this is somebody I'd like to be friends with or go out for a drink with. But there's that line,
the only
boundaries,
in terms of the therapeutic relationship, I will reveal things about me that I feel will help the patient. Otherwise, it's not about me. It's conversational, but it's not conversation in terms of two-way, But my favorite patients, I love working with writers. I have a lot of writers because my first career was in magazine journalism. I worked at magazines and websites, and I've taught journalism for years, and so I have a lot of patients who are writers and who, have a lot of self-esteem issues and procrastination, all these things. So, since I know both sides of that too, having been an editor, being a writer, all those things, and seeing how people use their writing and put all of this stress on it and think, oh, well, if I have a book published, my life will be wonderful forever, and just all these things that we do to ourselves. So, I love working with writers. We have a lot of juicy times in there. So I will confide things about myself. Like I've told them before I had my first book published, I also thought, oh, my God, I've wanted to have a book published forever and ever and ever. And I always remembered something that a friend of mine had told me who had actually won an Emmy, and I held it once to her, and she said, Sherry, it's great you're having a book coming out, but you're still going to be you. You're still going to have all the problems and stuff.
Well, that's true, right? Anything, losing the weight, attaining money, success, anything.
To my patients. It is true. There is no external fix.
No.
That's going to cure that void that you have inside, but yes.
But a book is really nice. But that is true.
Nice. It's lovely to have a book, but
but it doesn't change. Right, those things that still are there, really.
Yeah.
And I think there is a sense of certain levels of attaining, but without the work that is keeping from other things. Yeah, but it's still. Better to have a book than not to have a book. And you can go to Sherry's site, howdoesthatmakeyoufeelbook.com. Also on Twitter at SherapyNYC. I love that. I just followed you. I guess I wasn't, so now I am. Sherapy.
And then I will follow you back.
NYC, thank you. And there are so many wonderful essays in this book. Priscilla Warner, Mindy Greenstein. Like I said, Linda Yellens is very... Linda Yellen,
Beverly
funny.
Donaforio, Dennis Palumbo. A lot of people wrote really, great pieces in here. So
really dug deep. There's so much, and again, one of the things I love about about a collection of stories like this is that you can, especially if you're in the middle of a book as well, you can pick it up. You can be reading two things at once, which I really like. And one of the things that I liked here was I was reading Life is Loose Ends and Dangling Participles. If I don't play, I lose. Those are the things, like, it's just not all so neatly wrapped up, but it's worth exploring. And I think that, is this National Mental Health Month? Is it September?
This is like Suicide Awareness Month.
Okay, I knew it was something.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
so it's Suicide Awareness Month, and I knew that there was something in there that connected as well. And I just think this is a great book to buy for your friend too.
Yes,
I mean,
definitely.
Right? Especially the friend you're giving advice to all the time, where you feel like you're spinning your wheels, and maybe it's that same idea of not going deep enough. If you think you've done just about as much as you can do for your friend, maybe get them a copy of How Does That Make You Feel? True Confessions from Both Sides of the Therapy Couch, edited by Sherry Amatenstein, and you can visit her site and see where she'll be doing events. And I want to thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
I really enjoyed it, and I hope to see you in New York at
the
next event. Thank you so much, Sherry.